Proportional Response, Book 1. Chapter 24, Part 13, Planning for Victory at Great Cost. Duchess Golnar finished making her point. The Exalted Ambassador knows that we are colluding on some level at this point. It would be hard for him to not know if he applied more than a dozen brain cells to the events of the last General Grand Session of the Council. Hannibal tried not to breathe too hard through his nose. The smell of leather and sweaty bodies of various races had begun to wear on him. I wish we could hold these meetings more directly, instead of sneaking off during fighter practices and, now, actual events. I am useful now though, and have managed to head off a few battles at this point, so I guess I shouldn't complain. Henry took up the dialogue. The thing is that the guy isn't a voter, and so has no ability to act on his own initiative, or not much. We don't know if he's getting blamed for the way things keep going against the Exaltants in the council chamber, but it is a good bet that Jalat put him there specifically so she would have someone who couldn't fight back that she could blame. The fact that the guy is probably getting blamed for stuff that happened before he even set foot on this world is the sort of thing that just doesn't get mentioned when the person doing the blaming has as much power as she does. Kazlor spoke up. I'm just glad that the Penigra ambassador has decided to stay out of things now, other than his obligatory pushing off the no-confidence vote. He could have fought us on making him use the votes in fast, small sessions. He would have eventually lost, but it would have cost us time and political capital. Heavens and hells. We might still be fighting him now, nearly 8 months later. I will admit, Henry, I had a hard time seeing the wisdom of not going full nuclear, as your people like to put it, against the guy, but it has paid off brilliant. Inibal felt his face darken a bit at that. I really don't want us to waste time covering this ground yet again. He tried to hold his tongue, but words came out anyway. I don't think we can count the Penigra out yet. Not entirely. Kaz got an irritated look, like he didn't want to go into this again either, and made a somewhat dismissive gesture, but Yoro came to his defense. I have gone over every word that Bird said to Eldia repeatedly, and don't like what I heard. Eldia's recording picked up both the actual words Ditara used as well as what she heard from her translator. Automatic translation of any Penigran language is difficult as best, and translating the particular language that the ambassador was using in that interview, coming from the mouth of a skilled politician, is a matter of frustration. You see, everyone gave her a knowing smile, and she rolled her eyes. No, fine, never mind. The point being is that he made it very clear that, even though he has no further orders, his king still has plans that haven't finished. I just wish we could figure out what they were. Henry shrugged. No Penigra may participate directly in hostilities. That seemed pretty unambiguous. Yoro gave him a slightly exasperated look, but nodded. That was one of the few really direct things he said, which just makes me all the more suspicious of the phrasing. They are still up to something. Golnar took it up. I am sure they are, and we should continue to try and figure out what it is, but here we go. Inibal couldn't keep the frown off his face as Henry picked up the proverbial ball. But we know from his comments that his plans are finite. Henry turned to him and put on an apologetic face. I know you are still quite concerned about what they plan, but remember that they still see us, humans, as hopeless barbarians that should fall over at the slightest push. Of course, if whatever they provide does, in fact, give the Exaltants some sort of serious edge, then we will have to find a way to deal with it. Annibal's eyes widened. You don't think they will be giving the Exaltants technology? Henry shook his head, but Yoro answered. The Penigra are far too jealous of their tech for that. I have a few reports which indicate the Penigra are already worried about the pace at which the League in general, and the Exaltants in particular, are advancing their science and tech despite their best efforts to the contrary. They see the humans as a temporary problem, but see tech advancement as a long-term one. Henry shrugged. I think we can let this one go, at least until we get some sort of new information. All of our intel people. Henry gave a significant look at Yoro, whose hands blushed slightly. Have gone over the recording 9 ways to Sunday, produced their analyses, analyzed their analysis, etc. ad nauseam. The fact that the Penigra won't be in the fight, and still count us humans as unimportant, are what matters most. Hannibal shook his head. They don't discount your people, Henry, or the ambassador. Henry shrugged again. One Penigra, who would be risking his life and station if he even tried to speak to their crown about it, has respect for a single human. The ambassador has made it fairly clear in his attitude since then that he still doesn't consider the rest of my kind to be even worthy of notice.
Balud finally waved a webbed hand through the air and spoke up.
Yes, I think we should all continue our efforts to discover just what, exactly, the Penigra still plan to do for the Exaltan, but at this point, it feels like we are borrowing salt for a freshwater pond. Things are going far better at this point than we had a right to hope for. The Exaltans have figured out that they can't move their fleets anywhere without being met by overwhelming force by allied ships. The Penguin ambassador isn't even trying to push the rules, and we are able to make him spend his votes with chamber sessions that contain only a handful of ambassadors and take under an hour, and most of the nations which have stayed away from all of this because they fear Sultan reprisal are finally starting to understand that the lizards are not invincible.
Golner smiled.
We are getting closer. We are burning through that bird's tokens, slowly but surely. Then we will finally be able to actually have the vote of no confidence.
Henry nodded.
And all of this time and pain may work to our advantage. Everyone is losing their fear of the Zoltan, true, but there is something else even better. More and more of the nations are joining the boycotts against them. This is good in and of itself, of course, since it puts even greater pressure on the Zoltans and their republic. There could be an added benefit.
Euro cut in.
We can break their economic dependence on the Exaltans. This would have the side effect of breaking down the institutional corruption, which forced them to stay economically dependent on lizards. It will cause a bit of short-term pain, of course.
She looked over at Kaz, and Anibal felt his heart beating faster. The entire tapestry of action and effect played out before his mind's eye, even before Yoro spoke.
It will take considerable effort and money, enough that we won't be able to step in militarily very easily if the humans get in trouble.
There were a series of amused noises around the room at the idea. Anibal surprised himself with the bare edge of a laugh as Yoro continued.
But the Empire, through you, could to step in and soften the blow by brokering trade deals, providing startup capital to replacement companies, and providing technical expertise. Alincor would be perfect for it. Let the average sapient on the street understand that their life is much better without the Altans pulling on their economy, and we could get more than a vote of no confidence in Kilintar. We could get a call of forced reformation for the Exalted government.
Yoro paused and looked around. Everyone seemed lost in thought. So much we could do. The war really could end with the no confidence vote. Anibal could contain himself no longer, so he spoke up.
It would work, Kaz. You have the charisma, the chutzpah, and once you are Prime Minister, the authority to push the call through. Get the Exaltan government. The rules are there for it in the Charter, and the Exaltans used them a couple of times to deal with particularly well-organized, and somewhat popular, and recalcitrant governments. At least once, this led to the extinction of a Death World species, which made it to FTL before they were found and castrated. Anyway, you will, at that point, have enough popularity to push the resolution through. To sweeten the deal, allow one, or both, if they want, of the colonies which humanity absorbed to go back.
Henry started to protest, but Anibal held up a hand.
As the new seat of the Republican government, have them draw up a temporary government with a single job that they will see to it that fair elections are held on all of the other Exaltan worlds, and those elected will draft a new governing document. At that point, humanity will be at the forefront of a council-wide coalition, and no one will be able to trade, or in any way, back the Zoltans.
He stopped and let the idea simply hang out there. Henry had nodded along at first, and then even his eyes had gone wide at some of the implications. Finally, Henry broke the silence.
Anibal, my brother, you have done it again. This, the arena of deals, compromises, and social force, is your forte, and you keep proving it. In order for there to be a war, you have to have one of two situations. Either both sides have to believe that they have a chance of victory, or the side that will obviously lose must believe that whatever the winners will do would be worse than dying in war. The second situation should be far more rare than it is, but corrupt leaders spoiling for a fight are good at convincing underdog populations of certain lies.
Henry stopped and shook his head.
No, wait. Down that road lies a lot of tangents and blind alleys. No, the point being that the Zoltan populace already knows that losing will not be worse than dying, and more of them are coming to realize that winning will be worse than losing, and it is time for us to double down on that by pulling the plug on Zoltu Nature Sticks.
Enable felt his eyebrows draw down, then try to climb to his scalp.
The Findle, you can't mean?
Henry nodded.
It is time. Past time, possibly, but definitely time. The Zoltans have pushed more and more off onto the Finadil, both in military and civilian terms. The little birds have, of course, been all too happy to step up and help, to the point that they have damaged their own economy. Their government has made the necessary preparations to pull their people out, and the few who know the plan have begun to ask us when it will be time.
Enable felt a hard, tight ball sink into the pit of his stomach. Golner gave a wry smile.
So, these Zoltans are already facing rationing and have entire worlds on short rations. And now, they won't be able to move hardly anything anywhere for months, maybe years. There will be riots big enough that they're going to have to set part of their military to keeping the population in line. This will be very unpopular, and the lack of food combined with the response to riots will push that many more people to Mendesh's banner. Then, when it is time to actually vote to force a Sultan government reformation, the voters will face the entirety of the council, a population in open rebellion, and the pissed-off Deathworlders who have already fought them to a standstill.
Enable felt a smile come to his face, then fall. He wanted to take the words back, even before he said them, and they came out quiet.
All we will have to do is offer an out to the voters, something that gets them away from their own populace, away from any halls of power, but, I'm sorry, Henry, allows them to escape the justice they so badly deserve.
Henry closed his eyes and sat back, sighing deeply.
Again? It will happen again.
He shook his head. When his eyes opened, Enable felt like they'd been cast in steel.
Nothing for it. We just have to make damn sure, this time, that the bastards stay in whatever hole they are tossed down. We don't need another Halistfar in a few generations.